주시저글에 다가나래 때문에 두저래 다디가래 찌지는 셈비 칼로다 찬영보로 인도해라 배나 가나가타 두누두타 슈치모메 데즈 수 찌마로 디투나카레 네강이 뉴어도 라 잠잠가가 갖고진 저기 미도 따기 미도 소소솔 마냐자도 디기야가니지 잠잠이야가 지금 따기라 밀을 차도 댄선 드레치네 가래도 소소 투제 따따따따 메즈도나 셈다 시딜레 지스 직차이도 som더라.
So then, in many of you kind of agreed on the fact that indeed for us to experience true happiness, then it is important for the mind to be calm and to develop an attitude of contentment. Then along with that, now we realize at this point that we suffer as more, sometimes, many times we suffer more as a reaction to suffering rather than the suffering itself. So in that context, it is very important to realize that we need a sense of equanimity in our responses to setbacks and situations. Our reactions should not be extreme. And for our reactions not to be extreme, then the mind itself should be trained in adopting an attitude of equanimity, not always falling to extreme views, extreme reactions.
다강이 mambuji ngazo 생구서고라 다강이 가시지도 실로르베나 칠로자노 니마티에로 다카르멘바로 든도 실로근 쟁데스 요르데 마차지 ngazo 생구서고라 직전에 다다다일랜드 영암다던데 직내 남도 차단 던데 코랑 소서 남도 지체가 지네 디레 ngazo 칼로다 고뇌티니라 파기 미디 삼주들의 전화 lokpaji zonzo chobaje chi da dia lobarojira zamza 파기에 미디 삼도 지시하마고 아니라 내가도 모두 로바코로이다 미스안더스탠드 드즈강이 조사 있었더라 근데 이들도 좀서 짱마서 백해셔 못더라.
So when we say that we need to develop an attitude of equanimity, then it comes from the fact that when we say that we need to develop an attitude of equanimity, it comes from the fact that many of the problems or many of the sufferings that we experience in this world come from our own minds rather than outer conditions. Of course, there are outer conditions that are in the nature of suffering, but we suffer more as a consequence of our reaction to these outer setbacks and outer conditions. And this is the reason why it is important to develop an attitude of equanimity. And it is also important to realize that suffering, in its essence, is created by the mind. Why? Because the mind, as someone already discussed, that it is in the nature of the mind to be afflicted by automatic thoughts and so forth. In Buddhism, we call this discursive thoughts. The mind is always mind always projects these kind of thoughts. And when the mind begins to project these thoughts, then as a result of these thoughts, you begin to develop fear, suspicion, and anxiety, and so forth. And as a result of which you project these very same fear, anxiety, and suspicion onto reality, wherein in reality these are not founded. These are not found. And as a result of which there is a disconnect between reality and the imposition of fear, projection of fear, anxiety of the mind. So,
I
was thinking, like we always hear in Buddhism, like the mind is clear, it's peaceful by its nature. And with this talk, it came to my mind the question, like, if our mind is clear and peaceful by itself, then why our natural response towards everything is in a negative way? It's with fear, it's with... we never picture like the best scenario possible, or we never react with calmness or equanimity. Like our first reaction is to worry, is to create barriers, is to judge. Then where does that come from? Like why our mind is like that?
Ignorance. Te mo dilagirda. Semdi rangshinga zu seshiri parela gyora. Ne 등문에 주기 셈디 바보고 니 잠보랑 여러 와라 그러스 네 나슈나 디 넨덴 송고다스 세시리 바스 로이랑 신문에 디 마투바라 녀몽라 때네 쿠투투여를 송고여라스 텐데 샘지랑 신 모마데 텐데 이나스라 아니 만속이 준두스라 아니 샘 준두는 만속이 아니 치기 젠라 치기 젠념도 태는서 막하드네 아니 샘 툭도도스랑 시기 샘기랑 신문에 고라 세시리 바 아니 박배보데 이나스라 아니 칭젠 가르토나랑 신기직 미게와 미데와 딘데기 로지컬 장샤기레스
re jeta nga 생겨ran shi yose wal sende nga tudi shidoru shayi ra se korang la jön ma ra shi yose diga le pena nga shido diga le nga re da ka bu shogo do ka na mase thum da tena ko bul ka o ye na digi jablo la parche do ma bu ji ra tu ka de ma se chadi ma ngom thu ya chara pe dinde do shayi ra
So then let us use the example, the analogy itself. When we, in Buddhism, we say that the mind, in its mind, the nature of the mind is clear and luminous, clear and knowing. So now, when we say the mind is clear and luminous, then it is exactly like that bulb. It's clear and luminous. Now, if the bulb is covered by a piece of cloth or something, then what happens to the luminosity, clarity of that bulb? It's not the same anymore. So similarly, the mind becomes the clear and luminous nature of the mind becomes gets covered by the delusions, ignorance, and afflictions that arises.
pena nga tsawa no ya semge ran shi yose wa tima namni lobu wa le ra semge ran shi yose wa lobu gu tima gi dim pena nga ta ni ma tsawa sha de wa ni ime che ma ro ta da temba khoda tembe gi dim nga ta temba gi dip di nga nga la di tsawa da nga la yose de ma tang ni da ti na shi gi na lo shilo la ta na zo de je shena timu du di ra wo du zu dip de yen sa an ta da ma se cha de mi kara sa mo so ge lo se cha de ma te ma te ro ra
So then it is important to realize that is the nature of the mind. It is clear and luminous. So in the text, in the classical text or the sutras, it is mentioned that the mind's nature is clear, luminous, and knowing, but the defilements in the mind are temporary. So when the texts explain it in this manner, then we can understand it that when these afflictions arise in our mind, it does not completely destroy the clear and knowing nature of the mind. Just as look at the sky, there is a sun in the sky, and the sun is clear, the sun is luminous, but when the clouds cover the sun, it is not that the sun in itself becomes it is not the case that the sun in itself becomes consumed by that cloud. After a while, the cloud clears away. The sun shines again. So similarly, the defilements of the mind are temporary, but at its essence, the mind remains clear and knowing.
Kirakamdigalada yakadza tembako and chirigale tem nima mashan chiraya wakam to mara ani momo kashi nima la kajta tanga gemushuda nima iche marwa tin ne temba dan zukho nima de kaje ta yapu mashan ta yanzu de chirakam dle denle war cheda khozo ye thusa ishi di ngazo temba imba ha ma de limit cheda ngazo zamzo sem di ya ye di resan war mas hogu mei di tanda chadam mosun du zu sheda cheda ngazo zamzo nursing tu.
So this is very important to realize. For example, this reminds me of a particular incident from my childhood. So as we were nomads in Tibet, then the elderly women, they always are in charge of churning the cheese. And when you have churned the cheese, you have to dry it out in the sun. So during summer, when you dry out the cheese, then in Tibet, clouds, it can get a little bit cloudy during the summer. And then the elderly women, they used to scold the sun for not shining. And when you look at that, it is not really the fault of the sun that it is not sunny. It is because the sky is covered with clouds. The sun in itself is not at fault here. So similarly like that, if we begin to blame the mind itself for the kind of afflictions and disturbances that we experience, then this is a wrong way to look at it. The mind in itself is like the sun. It is always clear, it is always knowing, but due to the defilements and the temporary afflictions that arises in it, then the kind of natural sense of calm is disturbed.
Tene khasang di nalo de de da khasang sem shiwa da kala chik de shide we de chiri khala na no shu bo de penjo gre theng gore la ra china penjo re ma penjo lo go do ra ro na de na san na tun penjo go re ine ya penjo chipu la de de ngro ni umara penjo de ngu do me na ga na na mya de ro chik san na tun na sam ngul teng go do de go ri ine di chipu la na andi go na ga san no de ni ja go do ra 되게 아니 단다 같이 가서 직 토다 마와기 소소직 토우지기 고사라나 아니 배 대화에 뭐 쓰기도 와 뒤에 대화 때문에 말이지 거기 마지 람노요레 디 계속 쫓아와이네 심바질라 마르타완 심바질라 파니다네 디 대화문에 쓰니버지 말아 와
So then moving on with the discussion, it was shared that many people equate happiness with financial achievement or some sort of status that you gain in society. But when we're talking about financial achievement and financial consideration, then indeed it plays a part. But then in itself, like money and financial achievement cannot be the basis upon which one can achieve true happiness. One needs contentment inside. One needs a sense of equanimity inside the mind to achieve true happiness. And then some people think that if they are able to rise through the ranks of society and achieve what is considered a high status in society, then they feel that that is the extent of happiness. But this is a wrong conception of happiness, because that's not true happiness. There is no stability in samsaric existence. One day you have reached the heights of social status. It could be that after a few years it might not be the case. And even in the pursuit of reaching such heights in the ranks of society, it might be the case that if you are informed, if you are motivated only by that, then you begin to exploit other people. You begin to exploit other people in order to achieve such a status. And when you do that, that's not real happiness, because in order for you to experience happiness, you have to make other people suffer. So that is not true happiness at all.
죄송한데 아니 가서 거랑이 로제 신고서 오더라. 때문에 때때랑 아주 로 구수도부터 ran 진진의 휴체는 구수도 책도 란이 집을 로제 춘주 삼단라 나다 나이와 된대지 삼단에 로제 춘주셔. 지진 심지어 타지라고 삼단야다. 셴배기 직 삼단야다 보더라. 아니 제도 강에도 춘주 튀네. 되는데 무시기를 삼에도 직 그냥 단야라 소소. 되게 아니 빼 편도도 로 그냥부터 빼 개청버리다. 가서 거랑이 아니 순서. 디 오늘 가서 시딜에 뭐라 아니 조지디 책더라. 아니 저쪽에 팬데도야지도. 지금 점점 엔도 밀레지 팬도도 내가지 수수기 내가 아버지 채워이나. gondați manina chiurido taringa minjil pen thosun sanjira undi yapoda ta nima takka michani done suzu to go cheda karina ya ti ta ga ji godo gogo de zamjang so chime chola ro bachero da gengo da ta chi ksana ta ma chi ni labja ja zo kechambora ra.
So then moving on, we also touched upon how one needs to be open open-minded, one needs to open oneself to reality in order to achieve true happiness. And this is very important because if we have a very narrow view of reality and a narrow view of ourselves, then it is very restricting in a sense, and it restricts us from building meaningful relationships. Because where does this kind of narrow view of reality come from? It comes from a very strong self-cherishing attitude, wherein you only are concerned about your own well-being, and then maybe you extend it towards what you call your family, friend, and so forth. And that's the extent of it. And such a view constricts and restricts your perspective. That's why it is very important to be open-minded and open yourself to reality by thinking of everyone as similar in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. And we also touched upon the importance of a sense of community and working towards benefiting such a sense of community. Then this is very important to realize that when you work for others, then as you come back home, if you spend a day trying to benefit others, working in some community program, in some community initiative, then what do you experience at the end of the day? You experience a great sense of satisfaction, a great sense of contentment, and there is a reason why you experience such a sense of contentment and satisfaction, because your motivation was pure, because you are open-minded. That is why you begin to experience such sense of satisfaction and contentment.
다 오늘 세제 침불에 간대 조버라더라. 그래서 세제 침불 조버에 something 되기입니다. 근데 미지 지나는 지금다면 나 강의도 튀고 그래서 다 되네 요시리 공갈 콘들라야 지금 아주 레데켈렌지는 저 한마가라 레게 되니 사이기를 했어요. 아니야 근데 레데켈 말레나야 다 콜라니제 디 콘들라니들 잡을 주다 제는 지요라 코로나 차기 전에 코로나 남이 내단 차네래 주소 지기상이 생기 미차네래 근데 내단 심바징가랑 갈라는 때로 근데 체계지에서 스스로한식이 막이 구염 체다 수 콘도도 만점 되다 디마이게 이제 남도든 가시는 갈 레이는 갈 근데 가실 레이나 가상알서 다른 알서로 좀 근데 햄베잖아 양은 두기 콘도디야 만타이다 세상다 지난 거리네 내단 가지 로지침부서야 돼 뵙겠습니다.
So then how to be more broad-minded, how to be more open-minded? So immediately you cannot extend such a motivation to everyone. So we can become more broad-minded and more open-minded by being open to the possibilities of reality. That you always take into account that this is possible, that this could be possible. For example, you start with yourself. When you are faced with someone who irritates you and who angers you, then rather than always reacting like angrily yourself, and then if you begin to react with the same kind of anger, then you begin to think about it again and again. Why did he or she speak in such a rude manner to me? Why did he or she acted in such an aggressive manner towards me, and so forth? But that's the extent of your questioning. Wherein, if you are open to the possibilities of reality, then you take into account that he is a human being, he or she is a human being. As a human being, it is liable, it is perfectly possible that they can become angry. And they can become angry not just because of that particular interaction you had with them, but because of many causes and conditions which contribute to the fact that this person becomes angry. It could be the case that he or she is going through something. It could be the case that he or she is not feeling particularly well that day. So when you begin to open yourself like that, then you become more broad-minded. You develop what we in Buddhism call a breadth of perspective.
Teacher, and a current somebody carlas and anzo that leadership, mute showers ra, devala, the musician, mute do some of the dewashi right ra. Chidan did it, Chidan's miso like mute go to mute ra, ching do some and gaudo chegere. Mele mute go de Zamza mu shabanashing do shawamara. Mindu do some the drumas on the low pantaro shoot in the chijumara. I am Jebison chair. tab시 셴바시난 디만두나 디라 타나 셴바여 저 랑가 찍마도 도서 메바 마로 근데게 양산다네 디에 셴바 구양보에 책이요레 칼로레 미유디야 저런 다네 미유샤네 민지 디간 로마드네 셴바도에 삼다에라.
So then we also discussed one of us also shared that if happiness is a goal to be achieved, then it is an illusion. So in this context, it is important to realize that if happiness as a goal to be achieved is an illusion, then it comes from the fact it depends on what we equate with happiness. So in this context, then if happiness is looked at as a goal to be achieved, then we equate happiness itself as something to be acquired, something that that is attained. Then as a result of which, if then we equate happiness with a lot of different things. We equate happiness with ambition, we equate happiness with achievement, we equate happiness with all these different things. And as a result of which, when we do not achieve what we desire, when we do not attain what we hope to attain, then we begin to suffer as a consequence of that. Rather than looking at happiness as a goal to be achieved and equating happiness with a sense of achievement, attainment, we need to look at happiness as an experience, because life is experienced in moments. So then, so rather than looking at that, then you open yourselves to the possibilities of reality by being broad-minded, by thinking in this manner that if I do not achieve what I set out to achieve, or if I do not attain what I hope to attain, then you can always start again, and look towards achieving something else, look towards attaining something else, rather than equating that attainment and achievement with happiness itself.
Teacher, ani kazachi karlana sunam chambo yimba chok shebadi ani shidigi dewa wa shire dolasra tingune da sunam chambo da tangune na tanda disha samero chiparara tandero samaina semra shi kalo kuyam chida chi kal tanda ke chambo ani china chi shidi dewa do da kanili na covid do to yarana kala dewa ligla de nego dewa tere na saya na ka ning kala chambo sana a tari chi bushu chuna na di dewa chi tsugi ra so the same rally yore zamza same du sana ta she na chana covid do marawaina ta kya mani machi do marane kya marsan sen ta chli gora sano che ta ma hin ta covid do marana ta cha cha shin de ya kashi do da ngone nge thonse kashi ko covid ngoni do 나도 실로도 참가도 covid 제면서 꼭 covid do 라이도 다 고주스 랑가시 가도 거 같아가도 되게 강이 티니 도더라 되네 제가 때도 그런 게 배천도 샤라 시당 아주 직소소는 좀 보이는 알아 가요 버도 단다 디샤 말 상대샤 태디 디가 좀 sem에 자체 보셔야다 되게 팬도 세 시대면
Then we also touched upon the importance of feeling grateful, or this attitude of gratitude, in order for us to be truly happy. So then, from the Buddhist perspective, even though we do not use the term gratitude per se, we always stress the importance of reflecting on your own fortunes. The fact that you are very fortunate in this life to be born as a human being, and all the opportunities and freedoms that you have as a human being. So I think this is very important too. And then you also, the same person also talked about how sometimes they feel very happy when they get a good cup of coffee, and this might feel this is happiness, but in Buddhism we call that temporary happiness. it's not long-lasting happiness. You need the next cup of coffee to feel that.
That is not so good as the other one. You're disappointed and getting.
Yes, and Geshema also said that even worse than that, some people really need coffee to be happy. I've noticed it. That when we travel, then we sometimes are traveling in places where they don't have coffee, and then these people become very agitated, and they begin to insist that they want coffee, even if like there's no coffee at all in that place. So then, if you attach, when you become obsessed and very attached to your sense of happiness with this kind of material comfort and material things being met, then we realize that as a result of which you begin to suffer and have very negative response when you do not find coffee.
근데 인도가 당아서 직 나자 주는 거는 수수수 가와 내유나라 우리 심바 가리나래 아니 사자 컨디션 내와인 그런 가와 대와인 리기 여고 미드들 참도 지우진 대와이나 뒤에 거는 가지 시대로 책이도 봐 근데 밀 준주로 책이 되면 이제 뭐 지나되나 미참아 드라사는 나디 시대리입니다 그저 내가 가지 세 시대 위에는 변도 봐라.
So then moving on, one of us talked about how happiness is that sense of calm and peace in the mind when it is free from all disturbances and afflictions. So this is what we call ultimate happiness or true happiness in Buddhism. When there's freedom from the afflictions, complete freedom from the afflictions in the mind. And now, when we realize that this is the true happiness, then we need to relate it with the way that we equate happiness with things, relationships, and so forth. For example, we might say that our sense of happiness is derived from our sense of closeness that we feel with our family, with our friends, and so forth. Then, if your happiness is kind of pertains only to this kind of relationships, then what happens when you meet other people that you do not know? Whereas if you have the attitude that I would be open, open and receptive of anyone that I come into interaction, then it's much more beneficial. You are happy in all instances of interaction, not just only with your friends and family. So we realize that the mind plays a great role. It is a great effect on the way that we experience happiness.
타르는 이마 하고로 고마라. 그게 사제디 비바레로래. 당아지 근데 미리나 잔데 말아서 지금 남배이 취토로 상다와이나. 아니 겨와 딩아도 마마데 말때 겨와 하만하만에 가지고 많이 받지더라. 심지어지 참마 집어를 따두어이나. 그런식 다 녀우차이다. 아셔버 디선마다 사실 제서로 코제고디레 코드베 샤쇼르 누슈르 드네 상다는 먼저 라식이 다른 거다. 먼저 미인 받지바체. 무슨 참마 대화되고 동의되고 지바체 봐. 단 잠닝가는 충분히 좋은데 참 찍게 내가 가리는 아주 참마 까까도 그렇지네. 참마 파츠 통되기도. 봐. 진대지도 그렇지. 아니 아주 참마 찍게 수 파마 빙게장도 많이 게게. 소도 다 단단 아주 파마 빙게라는 쉬우뜨고요. 이 겨우면 단단 아주 무슨이요 말은 편저마다 파치만이 보여 말아. 근데 samdang rashi nga zu symbol kala thanye buligda ra tinde jile so na zu yichile ya da ani chigi su zu kangi thina pha la sa yu ro rewa je se ra dromi khejang ro la yum da zu de samdang ya pu du.
So then, for example, in this group that has gathered here, there are people from many different countries. And then even between me and the translator, we are from the same country, but from the same country, Tibetan, and we are both Tibetans. But then if we begin to identify along the differences of region, differences of family, differences of soul lineage and so forth, and then it is tough for us to connect even as Tibetans. And so it extends to everything, to all relationships. If we only identify ourselves along the differences, then it is very hard for us to build closer, meaningful relationships with other people. So that is why being open-minded is very important. And from the Buddhist perspective, we say that it is very foolish to identify along these differences as human beings, because from time, beginningless time, we have taken many births, and as a consequence of which, it is the case that all of us have served as each other's mothers or fathers in a previous birth. So then, if this is the case, then we are all the same in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. So if that is the case, then it doesn't make sense to kind of create divisions and create divisions in identity along these kind of differences of region, country, race, and so forth. When you adopt such a view, looking at a human being as a fellow human being who has the same desire for happiness and does not want suffering, then there is a sense of trust that can develop, and there is a sense of closeness, and the interaction and the relationship becomes more meaningful. And when you don't do that, and we always are concerned about our conceived identities along race, religion, and so forth, country, and so forth, then we become very isolated, and we cannot share our feelings openly. We cannot share our thoughts openly anymore. So it makes sense for us to be more open-minded, to look at a fellow human being as a human being, rather than identifying them along the differences of race, religion, and so forth. So this is very important.
Pena nganzu de la nganzu le mi zu ngwe shin shin ba ji ta de na ra nga zu pe ya yin ba dang ta da nga zu dong ba kha shi ka wa kha shi na wa ta se ma khar ye ba ne ta da nga ta ta te man ra thong de go yin nga zu de de cha de ra pe ya ro da ka de ji pha ma ro khar ni chi de te pe ngwe shi de ba ji ta de na nga zu en de do cha de ra pe ne ji khar le su ni ma en de su da ji ngwe shi chen ji ane ko ran ge zig le da de yo pasha sa yi mango do do bu de la pang ani kar jiden de la gemushele ta tsati jo ta chima chi do mas khanda khar la na mi chi sa da ni koran yi phamani de thong ani koran la daji sa da de thong ra tende yi diga la ani ko ta lo khashi ji ki jela ani amadi khari ki chawalen sa amadi chi ki chawalen ra chi ki chawalen ma ta koran na yi chi ki chawaje ta tende che ani pala di pen ra da lu khari na ta sunje de shasa dine ji chawalen da ani tangelo koran la dajora dadi khar na koran ki phu chawalen ra ta daudi phu ki phu chawalen koran pangal nya de resra ta dinde amadi mare pala di ludo ra na khari na ham sunje khari na ham sa khanda chi ki chawalen disen dig sha da sa de res ra ta abagi sha sa de ra ta amadi ni ji chi ki chawalen ko di sha dar go de la tola chendeli ora dinde indi gala ani digi kalor 아마 걸어 거시 잡아시는 거라 아 파샤 사신 파샤 디사데 오레 아마 고둥디 오레 다우푸디 수중염 다디 너라 빠데 근데 이제 디디 코아들라니 게모샤리 도스라 근데 레라 세상 간도 엔데로 차대
So if an awakened person look at the way that we kind of identify along the differences of family, differences of race, religion, country, then it is explained that they will find it a laughable matter. For example, there is a verse in this in the Didi Sheting in Nagarjuna's letter to a friend. So Nagarjuna, when he became awakened, then when he looked at a family, then he saw that that samsaric existence itself was a farce. When he then he said that he recited this particular verse that eating his own father's flesh and then beating the head of his own mother. Now he is coddling his enemy. Such is the nature of samsaric existence. So when he said that eating his father's flesh and hitting his mother's head and coddling his own enemy, he realized that the person who was eating mutton and beating the dog that was nearby him, and in his lap he was coddling his son. So he realized that the parents of that particular person had passed away a few years ago, and they had taken birth as a goat in this life, which was killed, and the mutton this person was eating, and the flesh which this person was consuming, and then the dog nearby, which was hanging around, was his own mother, and then the enemy also who passed away, an enemy that he had, who also passed away, was born as his son in this life. So looking at that, Nagarjuna exclaimed that samsaric existence is indeed such a farce. So when you look at that, then it is indeed laughable that we always insist on identifying along along these ideas of this is my family, that's my enemy, I do not like that person. Whereas we take uncontrollable birth in this cyclic existence, it is the case that we are born as parents to someone else. This life's parents might be your enemies in your next life. This life's enemies might be your parents in your next life. So such is the laughable nature in which we make sense of conventional reality. So we only have at the maximum 100 years on the face of this planet, and if we keep living our lives with this strict ideas about who are our friends, who are our family, then it is indeed a waste of time, and it is indeed it is not a sensible way to live our lives, wherein in samsara it is the case that we have all at one point served as each other's parents, fathers and mothers. So then it doesn't make sense to be obsessed with this kind of superficial differences that we notice. And for example, even in this life I am born as a Tibetan, but it might be the case that in a previous life I was a fair blonde person, and then there is no saying what kind of birth I will take in the future. So it doesn't make sense to kind of identify with these kind of superficial differences.
밀래 미 저지래 되가라 가서 남주 체도 제버도 봐봐 주레스라 당주 렌데다 사제 고만데 켈레니 지요이나 따티 두야를 초도 집어도 미루된래 들어 된족이 밀릴래 쓰고 라 디다나 가서 남주 숨지 셴바 부다 치다 심이다도 이제 혼자 되네 누버요 말라 기시 시고서는 시시마 나인 쓰니는 변에 치도 시디샤나 아도 치도 쉬우시나 거 녀식만 디마제 디치는 깔까브라 테스트 잘라도 파키시스기를 테스 키투는 무심다 베들링이 람도든 제네 타와 샹주고 센도 저랑줄에 제네 사제 고마 투 타벨라야 되는 랑가 두투에 빼깔래 가봐 제가 되네 인자 가서 밀래다 아 오늘 가서 단다 체네 니버 가서 두어스 남주 가서 두어 자제 가서 참데 주권의 년투니 파 지키다지 주권의라 내년제신이 파신의 시투니 근데 방고야 돼 주고야 참 하고 되니까 세상에서 밀릴래 아 당지 수수 가고 거야 지래더라
So now it doesn't matter like the differences, the superficial differences that we notice. So the most important thing is to recognize every one of us as human beings with the same want for happiness and not wanting suffering. So then it is also important to recognize the precious nature of this human life too. And as human beings, we are blessed with a very uncommon intelligence, an intelligence which is discerning, which is able to which is able to distinguish between what is bad and what is good, what is beneficial and what is harmful. And not only that, we are effectively able to communicate our ideas, and as a consequence of which, we are the only species who pursue spirituality, and we are the only kind of species which is blessed with this opportunity to pursue, blessed with the ability to pursue spirituality. And as a result of which, we need to first recognize that this human life is very indeed precious, and every one of us are blessed with the same intelligence, same discerning intelligence, and every one of us have the same potential to effectively pursue spirituality and effectively attain what we call the spiritual pursuit of complete enlightenment or complete awakening. Whereas if we look at in front of our own eyes, the animals, the insects and so forth, it is inconceivable for them to even have an idea of spirituality. The extent of their intelligence is to be domesticated, to like carry or loads, luggages and so forth, or their immediate survival and their immediate survival. That's the extent of their intelligence. But our intelligence is a discerning intelligence. So it is important to recognize that, and then in Buddhism, we stress the importance of feeling fortunate that you are indeed born as a human being with this special freedoms and advantages.
아니다 하자마자 시디 대화를 간디줄래 저런서 야 투어지래 티가랑가 좀 만다 시지저라 다든데 있잖아 쪼딩가서 센투니디 가르는 두순들에라 당가서 dom지자오더라 두순도 가르레스 저런서 지글라시더라.
So now this is a discussion about what happiness means to you and what really is happiness from the Buddhist perspective. Now, as a way of summing up this discussion, we come to realize that true happiness is that freedom, that complete freedom from the afflictions or disturbing emotions in the mind. And now I will ask you a question. So what are these three afflictions which are called poisons?
Attachment, anger, and ignorance.
Yes. 와, 딩고싱 거지. 제가 다 디중 거싱디 갈라. 거스 디중 거싱 투도 빼버라. 다 딩고시 비절 디기 아니 칸데스 두고도라. 디께나 kyonkar도. 디빵나 계산카도. 어디 있다고 이렇게 좀 라. 디빵나 수술라 세드다 심마다 가르가르 펜도도라. 디 제와이나 아 세드라 강이 겨 심마라 강이. 단다 수술 조고 참아 타린도. 그래서 막 뇌죄리 하고 난 그냥
So this is important to recognize the three afflictions, the three most basic afflictions of ignorance, attachment and anger. And now just recognizing the afflictions as poison does not help. We indeed need to gain the conviction that indeed these afflictions disturb the natural calm of the mind. And then in order to come to such a conviction, we need to contemplate on the negative effects of these afflictions. So you begin to experiment and investigate with yourself what are the consequences when these afflictions arise and manifest themselves in our behavior, and what are the consequences if we adopt a sense of restraint when these afflictions arise in our mind. And then you begin to realize what are the negative consequences and what are the kind of positive effects of abandoning these afflictions. Then you do not need to think too much after that, because as you come to that conviction that indeed this is not beneficial for me, then you would actively work towards overcoming and abandoning these afflictions. Now, discussing it, receiving teachings about it, and then reading about these practices in a book or in a teaching is one thing, but cultivating a practice in your daily life is another thing. And sometimes we attend a teaching or receive an instruction on these texts, and then when you close the text, then it does not really translate into your daily lives. This is not the purpose of spiritual instruction. The purpose of spiritual instruction is to be able to cultivate these practices in your daily life. So, in your life, you will come into contact with a lot of different situations, different people. So then, it's the measure of someone cultivating a practice is not becoming reactive or not becoming distressed and agitated in the face of these setbacks, for the mind to be able to stay stable and calm. That is the measure of someone who has cultivated or translated these instructions into a practice. So then we talked about a lot of, we kind of employed a lot of logical arguments and reasoning in order to come to a conviction, in order to arrive at such a conviction. So I will kind of recount these logical arguments and reasoning again, and I think it will be helpful if you note these down. So then, as many of you also shared, that in order for us to experience true happiness, then we ourselves need to become open-minded and broad-minded in what Buddhism, what we call cultivating a breadth of perspective. And then second, it is important for us to be realistic and sensible, and if we are realistic and sensible, then it also involves a sense of honesty. A sense of honesty comes from adopting a realistic and sensible approach towards life. And then third is what we call discursive thoughts and emotions. It is that kind of undercurrent of incessant thoughts and emotions that we experience in the mind. So we should learn not to give in to these discursive thoughts and emotions. And as a result of which we begin to project fear, suspicion, anxiety, and so forth onto situations, relationships, and so forth. And fourth, tying into the second point, we should always be mindful that rather than kind of pointing our fingers towards outward situations and blaming outward situations, it is always important to look inside our own minds to see if you are actively contributing to a source of suffering. And then fifth, trust. As human beings need interaction, then majority of our experiences of happiness is built upon interactions. So then it is very important to develop trust between fellow human beings. We should not always project suspicion, hesitation, and so forth by identifying along rigid ideas of race, religion, and so forth. And then the seventh one is not to be informed by a sense of competition or competitiveness all the time in your professional lives as well as personal lives.
Yeah, tini tanda shila cherwa. Ti jila nga zuk tunda di doya ira, chitu chikira. Nipa ni sumba pato, nga di chiya che. Di masaya sene mindura, tini inza nga tanda kaa sheba nga kazu shide layar kante chitongula di kala nga shirwa. Shide waya ane jida chen tere, ane tini pangur, tini shobur, tini yungur lama poji shir. Adi dira tsunu sela sha, ane kya tanda duyun shi tri shir, di kala sana tangu ne re doya nga nzu ki la ju di la injibi kelen wamada. Suso di doya di mida, wane ina kelen ra, la len ta. Di shira penta mudu tuda, taga sire sana, yu shira jigo ra. Di ji chi, ane konda nga chidu chikila di do, din je la chidu sumba shiga na shiba shiga badwa. Ane nga zu tiwa tili ra, ane kya nga zu tiwa kanda jine, tiya chi ra.
So that was a summary of our discussion so far, the kind of 7 points that you've noted down. And it comes from the discussion about what true happiness is and how can we achieve such a state of calm and peace in our mind. And now, before we break for lunch, in the sessions in the afternoon, the first session, we will explore the root text itself, and then in the last session, in the later session in the afternoon, 3:30 to 4:30, it is a question and answer session. So I encourage you all to ask your questions then in those sessions.
Tanda digi nga zu kazu mudni tanda bodo shi shabji di ra, ta chizu nyi ro ra, kazu chizu chik di shaga ra. Chizu kanda chizu sum di shaga zanga chik chue la yada kanda yemi sen joa kanda mampu ji ro ra. Kya nga zu li tezi njisa ro ji ra sa yala.
So we had quite an extensive discussion in the session so far, 1.5 hour in the first day, now 2 hours of discussion. So in those discussions we are trying to give you an introduction to the Buddhist idea of spirituality and the idea of what it means to cultivate a practice in Buddhism. So are you able to kind of effectively come to like a general idea and understanding or a foundation upon which you can kind of build this further? Do this.
Ani hawo chunjira. Mishi ha kya ze desa gala kale dura. Tila den thubu le ra, den ya poti. Shaba ya nana ya bumda. Ani chik nga zu machine ngora chana ina ga dabuta chera nga zu de chi kya zu la chik ra sam ta jira na digo ra.
Then it's good. Otherwise, you kind of put yourself through these sessions in that uncomfortable position. Then it doesn't serve the purpose. And if you need more cushions, there are more cushions. You can always make yourself comfortable.
Okay.